Hey friends, today I'm going to chat about the Uncharted series of video games. My first exposure to the Uncharted games was with Uncharted 2 at a friend's house. I believe it was a PlayStation 3, I think. It must have been around 2009 or so, 2008 maybe later, I'm not sure when exactly. And I already had some experience playing video games in general. Most of my PlayStation experience was actually at my friend's house, but I had played FPSs and I had played some RPGs. I'm not sure what I can think of before that. But I enjoyed it quite a lot. I enjoyed the game opens with you, the character Nathan Drake, in a train, and the train is hanging off a cliff. It's snowing, and the train's like gonna fall off, and he's been shot in the stomach or something, and he's bleeding, and he says, "Oh, my blood! That's a lot of my blood," and he falls almost off the train, and then the game starts, and you have to start climbing your way up the train. And I was like, "Whoa, that's epic," and the game continues to be epic. I think the Uncharted series in general, all four games, but especially, well, I'm not sure if one had that many epic scenarios. I guess there's a scene where Elena is driving off and you are shooting in the back. But anyway, Uncharted 2 was a fun experience. I remember I was interested in the plot. I did find some of the early platforming, climbing around, a little bit tedious. In general, I think I tend to find some amount of platforming a little bit tedious when it's dark and you don't really know where you're supposed to go. There's a certain challenge with platforming where they don't want to make it so obvious that you can see exactly what you're going to do and there's no challenge whatsoever. But whenever there's an instance where it's not obvious where you're supposed to go, then I find myself at least kind of, jump. And this happened to me in Uncharted 2 as well. I think especially in the parts in Nepal at one point, and another part where you're kind of climbing like a buildings that have been kind of blown apart a little bit, and it's like there's like snow and stone and stuff, and it's hard to figure out what the handholds are. So I'm kind of jumping at the walls. I'll probably do a stream of myself playing Uncharted, the entire Uncharted series again, with once I have my PS4 camera. But still, despite those bumps, generally I found combat to be pretty fun. And again, it's not perfect, but the combat gets a bit better with each game. It's frustrating in Uncharted 1, like the cover-based stuff is not super obvious, and the aiming is not super great, and the controls are just not great. And there's also a thing where sometimes the stage designs, the enemy positions and stuff, it's just if you're playing the wrong way and you can't know what the right or wrong way is, you will get killed. Like there might be some guy with an RPG that you don't know is there, and then he shoots the RPG at you, and that's an instant death, and that's kind of frustrating. But the game restarts very quickly, and you can, you then know where he is, so you make smarter decisions, which some purists would say that that's bad game design potentially, but I find it somewhat forgivable. I watched a video once that described the Uncharted series as like it's on rails, like a roller coaster. And so it's not an open world adventure game, right? It's a cinematic experience. It's basically kind of a treasure hunter movie. And all four games, I believe, have broadly the same kind of plot where there's some kind of treasure that you want to find, and that treasure turns out to be some kind of deadly power. Well, the fourth game doesn't do this as much, but like the first three games, I think there's some kind of deadly power associated with the treasure that you want to find, and then you eventually find it, and then you eventually either lose it, let it get destroyed. In 2 and 3 both you find like ancient cities that nobody has found, and then both the cities get destroyed. I don't consider this a spoiler. It's kind of, the games have been out for a pretty long time, and well, it is a spoiler, I guess, but like, it's kind of a classic adventure Indiana Jonesy kind of trope. Like, you find this forgotten city, and it's beautiful and everything and untouched, and yet, like, there's still lights and fire and whatnot, and the traps and the gears and the puzzles are all still working, and there are these elaborate giant puzzles that people made hundreds of years ago, potentially, to, for some adventurer to stumble upon hundreds of years later. You have to suspend some disbelief for all of that, and I do find that in the context of the game, it's quite suspendable. And it is interesting to compare and contrast the Uncharted series with the Last of Us series, where you can feel the similarities between the games. I think they even reused one of the assets, like in the beginning of Uncharted 3, I think you start in like a bar, and then there's that same bar in one of the Last of Us games. And like, there's some similarities between Nathan and Joel, like character model wise ish. You do feel like, when I first played as Joel, I'm like, oh, this is like a grittier, realer Nathan minus the insane gymnastics skills. And yeah, bullets are much more precious in The Last of Us, and you can't just keep firing all the time. You run out. There's almost no automatic weapons except like right at the end at some point. But it's just The Last of Us is a much more grounded and survivalist kind of experience, whereas the Uncharted series, it's wish fulfillment. It's fantasy, right? It's you get to play this very physically able guy who can climb everything, jump around. And the cool thing about Nathan is he does get hurt a lot. Like and I remember this being one of the things that was shown about Jackie Chan in, I think, Every Frame a Painting. R.I.P. to that channel. Jackie Chan, in his fight scenes, he's very enjoyable to watch because he gets hit. He isn't like superhuman. He gets hit, he gets hurt, he hits people, and he's like, my hand, and he gets knocked over here and there, and it's just very humanizing. Even though the character of Jackie Chan or the character of Nathan Drake, they are both obviously superhuman. And like, Nathan Drake can get shot all the time, and he loses a bit of health for a while. Like, the screen goes a bit black and white, but then you wait for a while and you recover. I mean, that's a dynamic in a lot of shooters these days. But still, despite that kind of in that superhuman-ish universe of Uncharted, Nathan Drake still feels human. He grabs handholds and they crumble, and he's like, oh my god, oh shit, or he slides and he gets hurt, and it feels very while that it's not realistic, like nobody could possibly make those jumps or survive those falls and all of those things. He gets hurt in the process, and you do feel for him, I find. And another thing I want to talk about, I guess, is it's interesting to consider so in my perception, I feel like the Uncharted series are held in higher regard than the Tomb Raider series. I mean, the early Tomb Raider games were kind of cult classics or whatever would you say cult classic? I mean, they were appreciated, I think, at a time where there weren't that many video games out, and it was cool just to have. It was novel enough that just being able to play as Lara Croft was exciting and interesting. And she was like a new novel character, and she had 2 guns and could do the jumps and all that stuff. But once that became kind of widespread, like commonplace, I think when you go back to the original Tomb Raider games, narrative-wise, there's not a lot they can do. Like, it doesn't really feel... I wouldn't really want to go back and play Tomb Raiders 1, 2, 3. And, partially, I wouldn't say it's because of the graphics. I can think of games that are old that have that kind of graphics that I would consider playing. So I haven't played Deus Ex, and I know that the graphics are like Tomb Raider-esque, but I've heard so many good things about the game over the years that I would consider playing it, even with those crappy graphics. I still like, SNES games like Final Fantasy VI and Terra Nigma. Terra Nigma is my favorite game of all time. And Final Fantasy VII, the original one, I was replaying it in preparation for FF7 Remake, and I still enjoy playing Final Fantasy VII, even though the graphics have aged poorly in a sense, right? So it's not about the graphics, but it's that it aged in a way that the game was kind of cutting edge for its time, but story-wise didn't have a lot to say. And I feel like the stories in Uncharted 1, 2, 3, and 4, especially 2 and 4, I think they have the better stories. I'm trying to remember. Slightly frustrating thing about Uncharted 3 is the story is a bit weaker, but the relationships between the characters are still great, and so it's still worth playing Uncharted 3. But I think you can tell that in Uncharted 3, they were trying very hard to have these very ambitious set pieces, and the plot was kind of an afterthought trying to work with those set pieces, which I'm guessing were in turn informed by the technology of the platform. And it's interesting to think that now, because when I was reading Masters of Doom, which is a book that I have a review video of, they were like John Carmack would come up with the game engine, and then they would try to, so for Doom 1, Doom 2, Quake, right, for each of these games, Carmack would come up with the engine and they would push it to see what it could do, and then that would inform the aesthetics of the game. And similarly, like in Uncharted 3, for example, there's one stage where you are on a at sea, like at a kind of like a pirate junkyard sort of place, and like it's quite a trip in terms of like camera angles and where you are. And at some point you're on a cruise ship, and at some point the cruise ship starts sinking and the water level starts rising, which is like I remember when I was playing it, I was like, oh my god, this is cutting edge technology. It's like never been. It seems almost magical / impossible at the time that they were doing that. And it still kind of did its fundamental story thing, but ultimately 2 and 4 are my favorites, I think. Yeah. So in 2, the game starts with the train falling off, and like towards the middle of the game, you get on the train that's on the tracks. And again, the train, even now, I feel like even now in 2020, the Uncharted 2 train stage is superbly well done. It's super fun to play. So much so that I think they recreated some version of it for Uncharted Lost Legacy, which is like Uncharted 5, but with Chloe instead of Nathan. And there's a train stage at the end of Uncharted Lost Legacy as well. And, I enjoyed the train stage in Uncharted 2 so much that I was happy to play it again in Lost Legacy, because it's just so good. This advancing up the train and going around the sides and stuff blowing up, and it's like a helicopter that comes, and it's very cinematic. It's very exciting. It's very... It's beautiful to watch, especially. I would invite girlfriend reviews. They should do an Uncharted playthrough, because I think it's one of the best backseat gamer experiences. And cynics will say that when you're playing Uncharted, you're kind of a backseat gamer, but again, it depends on your taste and what you expect. There's a lot of things like there are chase sequences in all the games that's really fun, where the game kind of guides you, where there's like a light over there, and like you run out into a room and you're being chased, and some people come from here, and you're looking around, and there's like a window up there, and then there's a light, so you're like, okay, I should go there, and then you run and you jump up there, and you just feel like you are making great decisions, which is a nice feeling. But you also know that it was designed to make you feel that way. There's a whole pathfinding, wayfinding design it doesn't use like overlays and arrows and stuff to point out stuff to you. It's just the way it's designed. It subtly nudges you to doing what you think is best. But sometimes you can get it wrong, and then it's kind of embarrassing / annoying. But if you manage to get it right all the way through, it feels like wow. But I still haven't gotten around to what I love the most about the Uncharted series, and what I think differentiates it from the Tomb Raider games probably, is that it does have good storytelling. I wouldn't say it has the best stories. Like, it's not like the plots are, bold and imaginative and groundbreaking in some way. But the nuances of the stories are pretty well done. So, especially, I think Uncharted 4 has the best elements of story. I'm trying to think back to 1 and 2. The thing is, by the time the story bills. You care about Nathan. There's Elena, who's like his love interest in one, and they don't actually, like, in one they're kind of still, they're slightly flirty, I guess, maybe, but it's not romantic outright. And there's Sully, who's kind of his older mentor figure. And in Uncharted 2, you meet Chloe, who's like the second love interest, sort of. And there's this great line when Elena meets Chloe for the first time, and she introduces herself as Elena Fisher, last year's model, right? So there's a lot of funny writing, and it's very human. And I think that's the thing that Uncharted does very well, and Naughty Dog does very well across all of their games, both Uncharted and Last of Us series, which is that the interactions between the characters, it feels more human and real than in most games that I've played. I have one of the Tomb Raider reboot games. I played it for quite a bit, not super far. I probably played like maybe 6 to 9 hours or something, and I didn't like it. I it's alright. I because I spent money on it, I'm probably gonna at some point download it again from my games list and then play it and finish it. But I wasn't having fun. It just, I didn't care that much about Lara Croft. Like, okay, what's her story? She's the daughter of a wealthy treasure hunter who died or something, and like she has to, I don't know, live up to him or some kind of daddy issue type deal. Which, again, I'm not saying that's a bad thing. That is like part of the motivation of Chloe in Uncharted, in Lost Legacy, and I thought that was pretty well written. Right, in The Lost Legacy, Chloe is teamed up with Nadine, and they both have their own daddy issues in a way, like trying to live up to their dads and their respective things and find their own identity and make their own mark on the world in a sense. And Nathan, in Uncharted 2, there's some elements of why does he want to go all the way? What's his... At some point, Chloe says, you don't have to be a damn hero all the time, something like that. And in Uncharted 3, it's kind of about him, and there's a major plot theme about him and Sully, and it's almost implied that Sully's going to die at some point. And it's just there's flashback scenes to when Nathan is like pretty young, like a teenager-ish, and he's kind of following Sully around and like how they first met and how they kind of looked out for each other and stuff like that. And in Uncharted 4, they introduce Samuel Drake, who is a bit of a retcon because there's no mention of Samuel in 1, 2, and 3. But it's kind of explainable because in Uncharted 1, Nathan mentions a Panama jail. And it turns out that in Uncharted 4, Nathan and Sam were in the Panama jail trying to find some Panama treasure, right? And they were like doing deals with the guards and everything, so they had to pretend to be prisoners, or they struck a deal with the guards to be prisoners in the prison. And then they ended up having to kill the guard, and then they were trying to escape the prison, literally, and then Samuel was shot and left for dead. And so it's kind of plausible that, Nathan was traumatized by losing Sam and wouldn't mention him anymore. And Sam and Nathan were both brothers who were in an orphanage. Sam was older, and so he was off, but Nathan was growing up in an orphanage. And there's just the dynamics between Nathan and Sam. To me, it, like, when I was playing it and watching it, I felt like it was a very well written relationship between two brothers, and like the younger brother kind of trying to live up to the older brother's expectations and be cool like him, right? And wanting to be with him, basically. And Nathan feels guilt for abandoning Sam, and so when Sam comes back, which is the kind of the plot of Uncharted 4, Nathan wants to help Sam recover his debt. So Sam apparently owes the treasure that they were looking for, owes like half the treasure that they were looking for back in Panama, to Hector Alcazar, who's like a mob boss who was his prison cellmate, and they broke out together. But then, and it's really interesting how they lay it out such that By Uncharted 4, Sam is married to Elena. Well, Nathan is married to Elena, and they are having a pretty comfortable life. They have a pretty nice house, and Nathan is doing like some kind of diving retrieval type job, which is like, it's active and outdoorsy. It isn't desk bound all the time, which is kind of Nathan's thing. But it's not risky and exciting. And if you've already played 2 and 3, you know that Nathan is used to like life-threatening, adrenaline pumping, falling out of planes, climbing around trains, that kind of crazy shit. And in Uncharted 3, there's a scene where Nathan is trying to catch a plane and he thinks he's gonna miss it, and then Elena shows up and it's like, it's so magnificent, those scenes. And then like she drives him up to the wheel and he climbs up and he goes into the landing gear. It's just so exciting. It's a really exciting game. It's I will say Uncharted is better than any action movie I've ever watched. Like, I mean, it's longer, so they have more time for storytelling, right? But after I've played Uncharted series, no action movie has ever come close enough. I don't know if maybe there might be like an action series, like a TV series or something, but I can't think of anything. Like Uncharted really, in terms of set pieces, in terms of the music, is so good. It's one of those things you forget. Like you forget that part of what was great about the game was the music, like the combat and the there's a part in where you're breaking out of where you go to steal it's not a crucifix, it's because it's not Jesus, it's another one of the thieves, and you go to steal an artifact, and they do it at like it's just some rich guy's house, I guess, some estate, some mansion. And then when you have to leave, like, wow, the music is just so epic and dramatic and exciting. And Uncharted 4, what else? There's like there's some driving with a 4x4 vehicle, and the part where you're escaping a town, I can't remember the name of the city. That's super exciting and thrilling, and the chase sequences are amazing. Super well done, and you can see how they've been building up to it from the earlier games. And I think even in The Last of Us 2, which I need to replay at some point, there's a scene where like where there's like a micro chase scene of sorts where you're in a car, and it's just, you can see that there are these skills that Naughty Dog has. Like, one of the things they do in all the Uncharted games is they have you have to run towards the camera, and that's kind of a nod the Crash Bandicoot, I guess. I think they call it the Crash Cam. And it's just, they've gotten better and better at this Crash Cam style and make it more and more exciting, and the camera angles, it's just so cinematic. And yet, I wouldn't be praising all of these things are praiseworthy, but I don't know if I would be praising them if not for the fact that the story was fundamentally interesting enough to me that I wanted to play it. And I will definitely, I think, replay the whole thing again at some point, like 1, 2, 3, 4. Because I've grown to care for the characters. I like Nathan Drake. Again, like, there's valid criticisms of the things that the game makes you do while to suspend judgment. Like, you're basically a genocidal maniac. Like Nathan, there's all these bad guys that come for you and you basically have to kill them. Right, and it's a lot of bad guys and a lot of, it's the same could be said of like Luke Skywalker killing stormtroopers or whatever, right? Like, just the faceless bad guys are just cannon fodder, and you just kill them and don't feel bad about it or whatever. But yeah, and the villain of the second game actually acknowledges this. He's like, you think you're so much better than me, but just how many of my men did you kill just today or just this week? Which is like, okay. But that's not so much, I would say, the heart of the game. I think the heart of the game is kind of which is really well explored, best explored probably in 4, and a little bit in 3, a little bit in 2, but best in 4, I guess. Which is and 4 is called The Thief's End, and it's just about the motivations of a treasure hunter and like, why are you going after. So like in Uncharted 4, for example, Nathan does try to stay away from the treasure hunter life now that he has a wife and he has a home, and they kind of happy. Like when Sam comes along and asks him to go treasure hunting with him, his first response is like, no, I can't do that anymore. I'm out. Like I'm done. And when Elena asks him before that, like, are you happy? Just in life. Like, I don't want you to think that. I don't want you to give up what you want because of me. And Nathan's like, no, I want, like, you get the sense that Nathan is being honest, and he's conflicted, right? Like, about, he wants the treasure life and he wants the life of comfort and stability and whatnot. And Samuel manages to kind of twist him. He knows that Nathan can be kind of manipulated, but again, it's very well written. It's like he tells Nathan, I don't trust anybody else with this. I don't trust my life with any of the other guys that we know. I only trust you. And then Nathan kind of goes along with it a little bit, and then it's kind of like when you pressure a friend into going drinking, and then they end up drinking more than you. It's kind of like that. Like Nathan, once he's in the thick of it, Nathan's clearly, the treasure hunting makes him come alive. And it's that itself, I think, is so well depicted that I almost want to really play it just to watch those. And I guess you can just go and watch the cutscenes on YouTube or whatever. But at a meta level, I guess I'm curious to understand what it is about the games that make it, I would say it ages very well, and the longer I've like that's what I want to understand. There are some games that age well and some games that age poorly, and it's not a lot to do with the technical details or the like there's a lot of bumpy stuff that's forgivable. I'm trying to think of a game that aged poorly. So Mass Effect Andromeda, the more time passes, the more disappointed I am with it. Like, could have been a great game, but you spoiled all the wrong things, right? Whereas with Uncharted, I find that, I imagine the next time I replay it, I will be able to maybe focus a little more on different characters or consider different points of view. I mean, it's not that open to interpretation. It is just kind of a action movie basically, but I love it. It's great. It's cinematic. It's fun. It manages to use that time and space to. It does ask some questions broadly about what does it mean to be an adventurer, or who should you. I guess you could frame it as like how you relate to it as a normal person. It's like should you be taking risks? Should you be pursuing your dreams? At what cost? What is the role of other people in kind of enabling each other? I think it's just interesting to contemplate. It's like theater, right? And yeah, I think human drama between different human agents with competing and overlapping interests is always going to be compelling if it's executed well. Like there's a little bit of a triangle between Nathan, Chloe, and Elena, and I would have kind of liked to see Chloe I wish Chloe came back in UC4 or had a bit of a bigger role to play in UC3. I think in UC3 she's like there for some part of it, and then she's not anymore for the rest of it. And I think UC2 ends with Nathan being worried that Elena might have died, and in UC3, I think in UC3 it's implied, it's said that they got like engaged maybe, or maybe even married, and then they were separated, and then she's still wearing her ring. Like just it's all those little details, and like Sully is this father figure who's kind of caring for all of them, and he's slightly enably at some points, but he also is kind of just looking out for them, and I love those characters. I've grown to love the voice actors because of their which is something I've been thinking about on a separate level, like how the mere exposure effect, right? Like simply being exposed to people on camera or in a video game even if they are well, and it's amplified by the fact that these characters are well written. So because these characters are well written and they're voiced by these actors, I find that I like the actors personally. Like, like I'm making some conflation between the characters, the voice actors, and the characters they play. Obviously, the voice actors are not the characters, right? But to bring the character to life, the voice actor has to channel a certain aspect of them. And I do think that you can, and the cool thing is Nolan North, the voice actor of Nathan Drake, he has been doing Let's Play playthroughs on YouTube on this channel called Retro Replay. So you can go and watch Nolan North playing Uncharted. So I recommend you, first of all, you go and play Uncharted 1, 2, 3, and 4, and Lost Legacy, and then you go on you go on Retro Replay on YouTube, and then you look up Nolan North playing it. It's just endless amounts of fun. And so I would say if you're trying to make a video game, because you're going to have a character that the player has to tolerate for many, many hours. And if you're making sequels, then that's multiple games. And you have to make the character someone that the player enjoys in some way. And I would, it doesn't even need to talk, right? So like the Doom Slayer in Doom and Doom Eternal, you just play as the character. The character is silent. He doesn't say anything. But you get to infer so much of his badass, don't give a shit character from his actions that I enjoy the Doomslayer despite not having heard him say a word. Like, he's just fun to be. And I don't know how much that is true for Lara Croft in the remake. I guess I will have to play it to find out and be more certain of my opinion on her. But the fact is, like, nobody ever tells me to go and play Tomb Raider. So, there's that. What else? Just to circle back again. Yeah, you want strong writing, and you want God of War has excellent writing, and I think it has the same kind of thing where, because of the motion capture they do, I guess, and the freedom that they give the performers to bring themselves into their characters, like, it just feels very real, emotion. Like the emotions feel very powerful, and the conflicts feel very true, and those feel like a privilege to witness. And yeah, so the story of Nathan Drake has been a interesting one of a child from an orphanage seeking fortune, seeking treasure, seeking he has a ring that's supposedly from Sir Francis Drake, which says Sic Parvis Magna, greatness from small beginnings. And people get that ring or that message tattooed, right? And I think one of the marks of an evidence that you've made a great asset, a media asset in some way, is that people get tattoos of it, whether it's lyrics to your songs or it's imagery from your video game or just whatever it is. Like, lots of people have Mass Effect original trilogy tattoos, and I think there are very few, if any, Andromeda specific tattoos, because their game just wasn't good enough to move people so much that they would want to carry it with them at all times. But the storytelling in Uncharted is really good. It's really, every one of the games starts with like a historical quote, and all of the stories weave through like actual history and actual events. I mean, they embellish it and they hypothesize and they come up with, when Marco Polo was traveling through this region, like, he took very long, but it's because he was doing some secret shit. And it's exciting, and it makes me want to know history better. I think that's another one of the benefits of the Uncharted series. If you play it, it will likely get you curious about certain parts of history, about Francis Drake and Thomas Tew and just all of these pirates and all of these historical figures. And I think so. Nathan Drake himself, he isn't an academic, right? He's just a curious guy who is athletic, right? Pretty handsome and funny, and he knows a lot of stuff. Like, he wants to know things, and he learns things, and I admire that. I enjoy at some point in Uncharted 4, pretty early on, you get to just walk around his house, Nathan's house, and you get to see like all his folders and folders of stuff and books and everything, and I'm like, that I want that. I want, it feels like a knowledge, like a home library in a sense, that's very personally curated and very intimate. And yeah, that's what I want. I recommend playing the Uncharted series. Go and play it if you haven't, and I'll see you around. Let me know what were your, if you've already played, what were your favorite points in the game? What were the things that you didn't like about it? What were your thoughts? Have you tried the Tomb Raider reboots? What did you guys think about that? Let me know. Done.